Hello, and thank you for joining us for our webinar here today. How can technology increase access to LSVT LOUD speech treatment for Parkinson's? My name is Beth Peterson, and I'm joined by my colleague Angela Halpern. We're both speech-language pathologists and LSVT LOUD training and certification faculty. We're very happy to have you here today, and we're happy to present on this topic regarding technology and LSVT LOUD. So we'll go ahead and get into the plan for the webinar. We'll just do a brief introduction, and then we'll discuss some logistics for the webinar so you know what to expect here today. And then we'll really get into the heart of our webinar, which is a discussion on how technology, including the LSVT Companion System and Telepractice delivery of LSVT LOUD, can be utilized to overcome any barriers to receiving LSVT LOUD. And then we'll have some time at the end of the webinar to address any questions that you may have in the audience. So in terms of logistics, right now everyone in the audience, your microphone is automatically muted, and that's just to make sure that we don't have background noise from the various environments where you may be joining us. But if you do have a question during the webinar, you can either raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon on your webinar control panel. Then I'll see that you have a question, and I'll call out your first and last name and unmute your microphone so you can ask your question out loud to the group. You can also click in the question box on your webinar control panel and type your question, and then myself or Angela will respond to your question over the webinar here today. You also have a handout in your control panel. It should have been emailed to you earlier today. If you didn't have a chance to get that or print it out, you also have access to it in your handouts tab on your control panel. So if you just click that handouts tab, you'll be able to click a link to be able to access that handout and then download it to your computer for printing if you would like to. So these are just instructor biographies for myself and Angela. It gives you a little bit more information on us. As I said, we're both speech-language pathologists, certified in LSVT LOUD, and we also train LSVT LOUD certified clinicians in the delivery of LSVT LOUD. So there's more information and more details on our background here on this slide. We just want to make sure you know it's there for your reference. In terms of disclosures, all of the LSVT LOUD faculty have both financial and non-financial relationships with LSVT Global. The non-financial relationships include a preference for LSVT LOUD as a treatment technique and the LSVT Companion as equipment to be used in conjunction with LSVT LOUD. For financial relationships, both myself and Angela are employees of LSVT Global, and we receive lecture honorarium and travel reimbursement from LSVT Global. So this webinar is part of our public webinar series. So it's designed for a very general audience for individuals with Parkinson's, friends or family members who want to know more about it, allied health professionals, medical professionals. If you are a speech-language pathologist, you can use the webinar here today to self-report your activity. It's not registered for ASHA or state registered CEUs, but you will receive a certificate after the webinar if you request it, and you can use that toward your certification maintenance progress if you choose to self-report that activity. So if you are a speech-language pathologist listening here today, you can email us, so webinars@lsvtglobal.com, after the webinar and let us know that you would like a certificate so that you're able to self-report that. If you're an LSVT LOUD certified clinician, we do encourage you, we have other topics more specific for LSVT LOUD clinicians who have already been trained in the method, and so we encourage you to look at your clinician account for those other topics that are exclusive to you there. There's a little bit more information for speech-language pathology professionals looking to self-report their activity. ASHA has a nice FAQ section on their website, so we've included that link there. So in terms of learning objectives for the webinar here today, at the end of the webinar, we hope participants will be able to discuss the importance of maintaining intensity of treatment with LSVT LOUD, also be able to describe how the LSVT Companion System can be utilized to increase accessibility to treatment, and then be able to explain how LSVT LOUD can be delivered via telepractice, or what we refer to as LSVT eLOUD. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Angela, and she's going to do just a brief review of LSVT LOUD so you're familiar with what the treatment looks like, what the concepts are, and that importance of intensity for dosage. And then we'll get into the technology portion and how technology can be utilized to make it even more accessible.
Great, thank you so much, Beth. I'm excited to be here with all of you today. To kick off this review of LSVT LOUD, some of you may be familiar with the treatment, some of you may have participated in it, some of you may not have been know much about the treatment. So we're just going to do a little review to try to cover all aspects here. But to start off with, we're going to show you a video of a woman who's 59 years old. In this video, it was 2.5 years after she had been diagnosed. Her medications had not changed. She was taking the same meds before and after. And you're going to see her before and after 1 month of LSVT LOUD speech treatment. Some of you may have seen this video before. However, we always feel like it provides a really great reminder of the types of changes that can occur with LSVT LOUD. So as you're watching it, keep in mind not just changes from pre to post in her vocal loudness, but also things you might see, changes in respiration, how she can hold the ah out longer, better articulation post-treatment, and also some changes in facial expression, confidence, and things like that. Now, depending upon the speed of your internet connection where you are, the video might appear to be a bit slow, but you still get the essence. And this is also on our website if you want to look at it at a later time as well. So let's take a look at that video now.
Do you notice any changes in your speech or your voice that you would associate with Parkinson's?
Yes, I don't speak loud enough a lot of times.
Anything else?
Hoarse.
Anything else?
I stutter, which I never did before.
Do this for me if you would. Take a deep breath and say ah for as long as you can. Okay. Would you say Parkinson's disease has caused you to talk less?
Yes.
Because?
Because I stutter and then I can't be heard. If there's noise in the house, like when the kids come over, nobody pays attention to them because they can't hear me. Until I get mad and then yell.
Take a deep breath and say ah for as long as you can. Have you noticed changes in your speech or your voice as a result of the speech therapy?
Oh, yes.
What have you noticed?
I talk louder. I think louder. I'm going to sing with the Sons of the Pioneers one of these days with my voice.
Good for you. That's excellent. Has anyone commented that it's easier to understand you now?
Oh, yes. I set some of our friends back when we went to their house and I talked loud. Lou says, "What the hell happened to you?" My daughter said, "Oh, Ma, that's you?"
So what do you do when you want to be as easy to understand as possible?
Think loud.
Great, so that gives you a nice overview of the types of changes that can happen after 1 month of LSVT LOUD treatment. Next slide, please. So let's just briefly touch on the types of voice and speech characteristics that are reported in Parkinson's disease. And so these are some of the things on the slide that our clients notice and that have been reported in the literature. So people talk about the voice isn't as loud as it used to be. Voice quality is more hoarse, maybe more monotone. People might say, well, my speech is more slurred or mumbled. And then some people also report having a little bit of a vocal tremor. So just as you might have a tremor in your hand or your arm or your leg, a tremor in the vocal mechanism. And interestingly, Some individuals notice changes in their voice and speech before even being diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Research shows us that a large majority of people with Parkinson's do at some point notice changes in some aspect of the voice and speech. Next slide. So the good news is there's something that can be done about that. LSVT LOUD speech treatment has been proven over the past 25 years with rigorous research to be a really effective means to improve communication for people with Parkinson's disease. We're just going to touch briefly on the important components of the treatment, so then you see why we're thinking of how technology can help with accessibility for maintaining some of those components. The first one is LSVT LOUD has a single target of focus on the voice. So specifically on increasing amplitude in the motor speech system to normal loudness levels. We're never getting people to a too loud or a scream or a shout. It's always normal loudness with healthy voice quality. So what we see in our research and here clinically is just by simply thinking loud, a lot of other things can happen. So people automatically take a deeper breath, open their mouth more, put more effort to the articulators, which results in clearer speech, have more improved voice quality, improved intonation, changes in facial expression, all of these things just by thinking loud. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see how it can get very complicated if you're trying to think of all these things to change. And what we see with LSVT is you don't have to think about all that. You simply think loud and things happen, changes happen across the system. Next slide. One of the other important components of treatment is that it is intensive. And intensive in the frequency, it's 4 times a week for 4 weeks, 1 hour individual sessions, and intensive with how the treatment is delivered within treatment. So there's multiple repetitions. The therapists are really pushing people to do their best, and we see that that's important for making change. We also are targeting a certain level of accuracy. So the therapist is really listening to that target, normal loudness, good quality voice. And then there's a healthy fatigue. Once again, people are never asked to produce a voice that results in strain or harshness, but it feels like a good workout, a good healthy muscle workout. And when we look at the literature, the data show us that intensive practice of this type is important when we think about neuroplasticity, or the brain's ability to make change. So we really see this intensity as an important component of the treatment. Next slide, please. Something that's really unique about LSVT LOUD is that it focuses on more than just the motor system. So yes, there's a lot of exercise through that intensive treatment, focusing on the voice, doing the exercises. But there's also a component in Parkinson's disease that affects the sensory system. So what we see is this mismatch between the online perception of an individual's output and then how others perceive it. So frequently our clients will come to us and they might be talking in a very quiet voice. And if I say, how does that voice feel? They'll many times say, it feels normal. But people are asking me to repeat, but I think my spouse needs a hearing aid. Then when I get someone to what is a normal loudness voice, I'll say, how does that feel? And they'll say, I can't talk like this. I feel like I'm shouting. That's directly because of the impact of Parkinson's disease on the sensory system. It creates this mismatch so that a voice that sounds normal to everyone else feels like a shout to the person with Parkinson's disease. Next slide, please. So why this is important to know is that it's essential to learn through LSVT LOUD, and this is directly targeted in LSVT LOUD, how to change that sensory mismatch. So we really help the people we work with to get to normal loudness, but then help them to feel comfortable with that and to see, no, that voice is not too loud. It's not a shout. And we do that through a lot of voice playback and activities outside of the treatment room. So you don't want someone always leaning in saying what, trying to ask you to repeat, but rather just being able to get to that normal loudness voice on your own. Next slide, please. I'm not going to walk through the treatment session in detail, but this slide just provides a nice quick summary of what's involved in a 1-hour LSVT LOUD treatment session. So the first half of the session is where we're really doing all those daily exercises. So holding out these ahs and really pushing maximum duration and loudness. And then to work on getting more intonation into the speech, we do some pitch stretches, some high and low ahs. And then we have people come up with phrases that they say every single day. And we practice those several times in that normal loudness voice. The idea being when they walk out of the treatment room and say that phrase, it reminds them to be loud. The second half of the session is dynamic. It changes each session. And this is where we start simple at a word phrase level and gradually get more complex, with the ultimate goal being week 4 that we're at a conversation level of incorporating this new normal loudness voice. And we do this in a variety of reading and conversational activities. One of the things that makes LSVT LOUD unique is looking at this principle of neuroplasticity of saliency. The therapists really work to make all of the treatment activities personalized and salient. So any of the reading or conversation is all tailored to each individual and what's important to them. And we really see that's essential to get that voice to carry over into real life outside of the treatment room. And so there's also some homework and carryover exercises incorporated as well. Next slide. So that's your brief review of the treatment. And as I've mentioned, LSVT LOUD has over 25 years of this efficacy data, rigorous research showing that it works. In that, we've established the importance that the treatment needs to be intensive, meaning it needs to be delivered 4 times a week for 4 weeks. That's the gold standard. However, we realize that intensity of treatment is tough sometimes in the real world. So let's talk next about what are some of those challenges and how can we overcome them. So when we look at intensive treatment, sometimes people may say, well, I want LSVT LOUD, but I live 50 miles from a certified therapist. It's difficult for me to drive to get there. Or it's hard for me to get out of the house. You know, it's hard for me to get around. Or some people may say, well, you know, I get around okay, I just don't have transportation. Sometimes people might want to see a therapist that's far away, but it's expensive to travel and get there. And then there's just the comments we get from our patients about how tired they are sometimes, that, well, by the time I get up, I get ready, I drive to see you, I come in, I get home, it's exhausting. So these are some real world challenges that sometimes can possibly create obstacles when people think about wanting to participate in a treatment that's 4 times a week for 4 weeks. So next slide, please. How can we overcome these? How can we make LSVT LOUD more accessible? Next slide. We're really fortunate in this day and age to have some wonderful technology options to help with this. Technology can serve as a way to enable people to still receive that intensity that's important in the treatment, even if it's difficult to physically come to see the therapist 4 times a week for 4 weeks. Next slide. We're going to focus on 2 technology options. Beth is going to talk to you in a little bit about LSVT eLOUD, which is LSVT LOUD delivered via the internet or telepractice. So hold that thought and she'll come back and talk to you about that. I'm going to talk to you right now about use of the LSVT Companion. Next slide. So the LSVT Companion is a software system that can be downloaded to your computer at your home. And then it comes with a specially hand calibrated microphone that allows it to accurately collect the loudness and when you're working on pitch stretch information, so the highs and the lows, and duration information. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail, but this slide just shows you a screenshot of what one of the screens looks like, and you see the little calibrated microphone clipped to the top of the computer there. And we'll walk through each of these components a little bit more now. Next slide. So some of the key features are that the Companion provides real-time audio and visual feedback to you as you're practicing based on the goals your clinician has set for you. So it's personalized to you. It's personalized to the loudness level your clinician thinks you should be at and for the duration. So if you look on the left, bottom left of your screen, you'll see a screenshot that says loudness 80. That's measuring decibels. And so this individual was holding a and it was reading at 80 decibels. You'll see time, and that's in seconds. And so that was saying they were holding it for 7 seconds. And then it gives you a nice visual display where the target goal set by the clinician was set at a minimum of 75 decibels. You see the 75 on the y-axis there. And that green area is where the target voice is supposed to be. So if that blue line is in the green area, when you're practicing, you know you're at the target you're supposed to be at. And we'll show you a little video that gives some feedback, so you'll see how the audio feedback would work for that as well. Then the nice thing is, as you're practicing, everything you're doing is going into an Excel spreadsheet. So you see that on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. So all the information is automatically being calculated by the LSVT Companion and being put into a spreadsheet. It only collects numbers of loudness information. It doesn't actually record what you're saying, so there's no identifiable information. It just gives those numbers. And then what you can do if you're using this for part of your treatment sessions or to practice on your own is you can share that spreadsheet with your therapist and they can see exactly what you did at home. Next slide, please. This is an FDA cleared medical device. So with that, when someone wants to purchase the Companion, if you want to use it at home, one of the first questions our office staff will ask you is, well, who is your LSVT LOUD certified therapist? Because you need to be working under the care of an LSVT LOUD certified clinician, because that person needs to assess, is this something that would work well for you? It works well for some people, some other people, maybe other methods of practice are going to be better. And then the clinician also needs to be able to program your individual targets and goals and put in your own reading materials. So remember that I mentioned earlier that an important component of therapy is having things that are personalized, salient for you when you're doing reading and conversation. That's how you get the most generalization and carryover. So those same components are incorporated into the Companion when you're doing practice. Your own personalized reading and conversation materials can be programmed in. And we do also have a version of the Companion available in German as well. Next slide, please. So we're going to take a look at a video now, and what you're going to see is an individual doing just a sample of some of the ahs and then doing a reading activity. So let's go ahead and take a look at this video.
Okay, sorry, I think that the audio was not playing, so we're just going to play that video again so you can hear the audio. Okay, I think we got it now. Let me try it again here.
Okay, let's get ready. Let's do those loud ahs. Pump up the loudness. You need to be louder. You have important things to say.
A citizen of the United States for at least 7 years and be a legal inhabitant of the state they represent. U.S. senators must be at least 30 years old, a citizen of the United States for at least 9 years, and be a legal inhabitant of the state they represent.
All right, so that gives you just a little demonstration of how things might work with ah and with the reading. So you could see in the video the first time the person did a ah and they were too quiet, and so that blue line wasn't quite in the green zone. So then the feedback that was given was you need to get louder. And then the person was a little short, and so it didn't give the feedback until they had done a long phonation. And then the personalized reading was programmed in, and you could see at the top of the screen there was a line going across to give that feedback as far as loudness. So with this, it's individually programmed for each person depending on their goals, their personalized reading, and then there's hundreds of feedback phrases programmed in based on loudness and duration and all the aspects of the treatment. So that gives you a sample of that. Next slide, please. So the companion, the LSVT companion, came about because of these issues we've been talking about, that we know maintaining intensity of treatment is important, but we know there are real life challenges. So when we initially developed the companion system, the idea was to see, could it possibly be used for a portion of the LSVT LOUD treatment sessions if someone lived too far away or had transportation issues, all those things that we've talked about. So what you're seeing here is a graph from a study that was published in 2012 in AJSLP. And this is actually, this graph itself isn't in that publication, but it's data from that publication. And you're looking at loudness levels from before in the lilac, after in the salmon, and at 6-month follow-up in the yellow across a range of speaking activities. And what you see is that people were louder post-treatment, maintaining loudness out to 6-month treatment across these tasks. And so individuals in this study did about half of their sessions face-to-face with a therapist and about half at home with their personally programmed LSVT companion system. And these changes in loudness, doing that mechanism or method, are consistent with what we see in our previously published data when people did all 16 sessions face-to-face. So this showed us that this could be an option for helping to maintain intensive practice. So it's something you could talk to your therapist about if you're interested in possibly using the companion for a portion of your therapy sessions. Next slide. The companion can also be used for home practice while you're doing LSVT LOUD with your therapist, or for continued practice after you're finished with LSVT LOUD therapy. So it's always looking at what are those motivational tools to help each individual continue to practice. And if you like computer programs and that feedback, maybe that's a motivational tool that would work well for you. Next slide, please. So this slide gives you some information if you were interested in purchasing the companion. gives you more information about it. And then, as I said before, you would need to let us know who your LSVT LOUD Certified Clinician is, because we have to verify that together, because they would decide and set the goals and that sort of thing. And this information's in your handout as well for your reference. Sometimes too, clinicians might have an LSVT companion system on a smaller computer that they don't use as often, that they may actually even be able to loan to you if you wanted to try it out. Next slide. So sometimes people ask us, will my insurance cover the LSVT Companion Client Edition, the one I would want to use at home? Well, check it out. We've heard variable reports. For some insurance companies, no, but we have heard of instances where people have been able to get it approved. So check with your health plan, check with your speech therapist. It is an FDA cleared device, so that can help sometimes. Cigna in particular, we have had clinicians report having success with helping their clients to get companion systems reimbursed when they have Cigna. We've also had some speech language pathologists that work in the VA system, and in certain of those facilities, they've had good success with the VA reimbursing the price of companion systems for people. And then maybe through different vocational resources, you might be able to get funding that way as well. Next slide. So these are just some additional resources that are available if you were to get the companion system. So there's a user guide that has pictures and diagrams and all sorts of information that comes with it. Also, we have tech support always available for you. We have several videos that give demonstrations of how to use the companion. And then we also just have our team is always available at info@ to answer any questions. We also do some webinars that are more specific to the actual function of the companion that are available for review as well. I'm now going to turn it over to Beth, and she's going to talk about the technology aspect of telepractice.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Angela, for that great overview and introduction to the technology. So the next section, I'll cover telepractice delivery of LSVT LOUD, which we refer to as LSVT eLOUD. So we'll go ahead and break that down in the next few slides here. So what is LSVT eLOUD? So this would be LSVT LOUD delivered at a distance using telecommunications technology. So for example, you would have a webcam, you would have an internet connection, and then your clinician would provide some type of web conferencing platform that you would utilize with the clinician to do the treatment and assessment sessions. So it would be identical to in-person treatment in terms of the target. So just as Angela mentioned, that target is still going to be vocal loudness. The mode will still be high intensity, so you'll still have those 4 days a week for 4 weeks, 1-hour sessions. Your clinician will still push you to high effort levels every single session. And then your clinician will also still focus on calibration, so you're able to rescale that amplitude or that vocal loudness so that you now by the end of treatment are able to use a new loud voice automatically. So it should look just like your in-person treatment, except you're doing it online. So you see your clinician in the corner of your screen, and then your clinician sees you on the screen as well. But everything should be identical to the in-person treatment. So this is a telepractice statement that our governing body, so this is who licenses speech language pathologists in the United States. This is called ASHA, the American Speech Language and Hearing Association, and this is their statement on telepractice in general. So the use of telepractice does not remove any existing responsibilities in delivering services, including adherence to the Code of Ethics, scope of practice, state and federal laws, and ASHA policy documents on professional practices. So the quality of services that are delivered to you over telepractice must be consistent with the quality of services delivered face-to-face. So we don't want technology getting in the way of great treatment. And ASHA puts forth this statement saying that clinicians that are doing telepractice must deliver it in the same type of way, following the same guidelines, same licensure as they would if they were seeing clients face-to-face. So the next slide, we'll see a video here This is just a small clip from a gentleman who received LSVT eLOUD with one of our faculty instructors, Dr. Cynthia Fox. And so you can see a little bit how it's set up. So this is more from the clinician view, but you can see that she sees the client. She's actually using the LSVT Companion on her end to collect the data. And then the client is just there on the screen going through the exercises, for this one specifically the AW exercise, as Cynthia directs him. So let's go ahead and look at that here.
All right, let me just measure my distance here to my microphone and the computer. And we're going to start with those big ahs. Oops. So when you're ready, let's start with a nice big ah. Good, keep going. Okay, how was that one?
It felt good. I think it was a little lower than I should be doing.
Right, I agree. Got to pump it up a bit more. When you're ready, let's do it. I want that full 8 effort.
Okay, so you can see that would be similar to how she would be doing an in-person session. We'll talk a little bit about materials needed for the client for doing telepractice. But one thing, so Cynthia measured the distance from her microphone to the computer speaker. On your end as the client, you would have a tape measure and you would always measure the distance from your mouth to your computer's microphone to always make sure that you're at the same distance so that your clinician can collect accurate data on your productions. There is a wealth of research now. We're it's really starting to surge into research on telepractice. And Deb Theodoris, you'll see her name a few times listed here, and she's really led some of this research. She's based at the University of Queensland in Australia and has done some really nice research on LSVT LOUD and telepractice and feasibility and seeing just the results on how participants are doing in telepractice compared to face-to-face. So there's some nice research studies listed here if you would like to look into this further and what the research shows about it. This chart summarizes some of the research and specifically talks about changes in decibels of sound pressure level or vocal loudness from pre-treatment or before treatment to post-treatment, directly after treatment. And what we're really interested in here, and I'm going to try to pull up a little highlighter, but is this right-hand column here. So all these studies, the first two are the live face-to-face. These are really the gold standard efficacy studies. And we're seeing that they have, in conversation, individuals were getting 4.7 decibels or 5.5 decibels louder from pre to post. So that was a significant change. And again, that's really what we're interested in because we want to know what can people do in conversation or their more natural, regular speech at the end of treatment as opposed to a structured activity. That's really what we're getting at in treatment. So we see here the third box down, we see the Theodoris study in 2006 and some nice results, very comparable to the in-person delivery with 5.5 decibels. So again, a nice change in vocal loudness and conversation. The next study is the Halpern study that Angela talked about earlier in the presentation, which was actually using the LSVT Companion. So that wasn't a telepractice study, but that data is listed on this chart as well. And that was when 7 of the sessions were done at home on the LSVT Companion, so independently by a client, and 9 of the sessions were done in clinic. So again, some nice changes there. Even a little bit above what we saw in the face-to-face for all 16 sessions. And then the last study you see here is a more recent study by Theodoris, so here in 2016, and she was looking at face-to-face delivery, then metropolitan online, and then non-metropolitan online, so more rural or suburb areas not in the main metro area. And again, some nice changes, some significant changes pre to post in decibels of sound pressure level. So this type of data gives us confidence that we can use telepractice and not reduce the results or the outcomes in LSVT LOUD. So it's a nice way to still be able to see clients even if they have difficulty getting to the clinic or making it for all 16 sessions due to mobility, time, whatever the issue may be. So some nice research to support that here. All right, we'll go back to our slideshow here. So I mentioned a little bit earlier about some of the treatment materials needed, and I talked about measuring the distance for your computer's microphone. So really on your end, as a client, you would need an internet connection. And it's recommended to use the Ethernet connection to have the strongest signal, or if you have strong Wi-Fi, that's okay, and your clinician can certainly work with you to optimize the best type of web or internet connection for you, so that there is no lag or decreased quality in the session. Also a webcam, and a lot of computers now have those built directly in, or you can purchase one fairly inexpensively. And then speakers, and again, those are typically built into the computer. You may look into an external microphone so that you have a good audio signal, but a lot of times, again, computers these days have nice microphones built right in. So you just want to know where that microphone is if you're using the built-in one, so that you know where to measure each session. So you would have that tape measure to measure your microphone distance on your end. And again, your clinician would walk you through this setup, but just to give you an idea here. We would recommend a typing stand where you could place your readings while you're reading them to your clinician. A printer to print the treatment and homework materials, or if you worked with your clinician and they wanted to mail you materials ahead of time, that would be okay as well. Or some clients might use like a second computer or an iPad, or another device where they could pull up the readings electronically. So just working again with your clinician on a way that you can have those materials in your wherever you are, your home or your office, wherever you're receiving treatment. Making sure you have a quiet room so there's not kids or animals or a lot of traffic, so that doesn't get in the way of your clinician being able to accurately hear you. Making sure you have a comfortable chair that directly faces the screen so that you're optimized in your position for the treatment sessions. And then we always say have a safe position for your water cup, because the last thing we want is for the water to dump all over the computer. Mess up your sessions, but then also mess up your computer. So just making sure to think about that as well, and where you can safely place a water cup, because you will need to stay hydrated during the sessions. So some considerations for LSVT LOUD or eLOUD. Are you comfortable with technology? And if you're not, do you have IT access that can help you? I know some computers you can purchase a Geek Squad subscription with it, and they can help you get set up, or if you run into issues, they can help you with that. Or do you have a tech-savvy friend or family member who can help you get set up? And then we recommend, I think that I have this on another slide, but we tell clinicians before you begin your assessment and treatment sessions, we always recommend getting on just a short 15 or 20-minute session with the client and clinician to test all the settings, just as you're going to do in a live assessment or treatment session, to make sure the volume works well, the audio is going well, the output and input on both ends, and then just making sure those settings don't change throughout the course of treatment, or that you note what the settings are and your clinician does as well, so you can get back to those settings during treatment. And that's really to make sure that the clinician can collect accurate data on the treatment sessions, knowing that none of the audio settings have changed, that the distance has remained the same on both your end and the clinician end. So that's why we recommend doing that test session. And then you can discuss with your clinician the ratio of in-person to telepractice sessions. So does the clinician want to do the evaluation in person, or will all the sessions be done via telepractice? Will you alternate some in the office and some via telepractice? So just discussing the options with your clinician. There are different regulations per state. So I know, for example, when I was working in Texas, we had to do the evaluation in person, but then the sessions of treatment could all be done via telepractice. So making sure that your clinician's aware of that. Also good for you to be aware of that. And then again, this falls more to your clinician, but are they licensed in your state? So some clinicians will practice across state lines, and they'll have to be licensed in both their state where they're delivering the services and the state where you're receiving services. So that's just something that we talk to clinicians about to make sure they're aware of that. So again, I mentioned earlier doing a test session also. We recommend clinicians do that with clients to make sure there aren't any glitches or holdups during the first, either the assessment or those treatment sessions. So questions to ask an LSVT eLOUD certified clinician. So you want to ask them, how many clients have they seen face-to-face? And we tell clinicians that they should see a minimum of 3 clients face-to-face doing the LSVT LOUD protocol. So that would be in person in their clinic or home office, wherever they're doing it, to make sure that they're comfortable with the treatment protocol, that they're getting the outcomes that are comparable to what we've seen in the research, and that they feel comfortable, again, knowing how to shape and model and cue clients to produce the best types of voice. So you want to make sure that they've seen a minimum of 3 in-person, face-to-face. You could also ask them what telepractice platform they use, or another name for that is what web conferencing service do they use. So for example, in this webinar here today, we're using a platform called GoToWebinar, and it has like a sister platform called GoToMeeting where we can do telepractice over that. So just asking what one they're using, and then asking if they have a business associate agreement or a BAA with the platform to ensure protection of your personal data. So for example, there's different levels of encryption for these different types of platforms. So you might use Skype or FaceTime to talk to friends or family members, but those are not HIPAA compliant and would not have a BAA or that type of agreement with a clinician. So it's important that your clinician is at the next level up at least, and is able to get that agreement with the company to ensure that your data are protected, so that they have that encryption at that next level. So just asking them what platform they use and if they have that agreement, so that you can, again, feel confident in doing the treatment over the internet. So in terms of reimbursement for telepractice, so private health insurance, some states have passed laws that mandate coverage of telepractice. So we just recommend that clients and clinicians check their policy, so that you know if telepractice is going to be reimbursed for these services. And then ASHA, the organization I mentioned earlier, they have a nice link with information state by state. So it includes things like reimbursement and licensing for clinicians and things like that. But you could also check that out so that you're aware about the state information for reimbursement wherever you live. Medicare, so Medicare does provide or does reimburse for telepractice coverage for some types of professionals. Unfortunately, it does not for speech language pathologists or audiologists at this time. So if you're a Medicare beneficiary and that's your primary insurance that would be billed, then you would not be able to receive telepractice services at this time. ASHA and other companies are working hard to try to get that changed so that it does become more accessible to Medicare beneficiaries. It also means that Medicare beneficiaries may not pay for services privately. So even if you tell a clinician, well, I really want to do the treatment via telepractice, unfortunately, if you're a Medicare beneficiary, you wouldn't be able to do that. So that's why we say if you do have private health insurance as a primary insurance, you could certainly look into that and see if they do reimburse for telepractice. Medicaid is also determined on a state level. So again, you could look at the link on ASHA or check state by state wherever you're residing and see if Medicaid would cover telepractice in the state that you're in. So how do you find an LSVT eLOUD clinician? So you can go on our website, lsvtglobal.com, and click on Find a Clinician, and then you can select a box that says LSVT eLOUD Speech Language Clinicians. You can enter your search criteria, so where you're located, city, state, and then click on Search to display clinician certified in your state. We are going to launch a new website very shortly, within hopefully 2 or 3 weeks or less. And this search tool will be even more comprehensive. So you'll really be able to find even more clinicians that are certified in your area, or your state, I should say, licensed in your state and certified in LSVT LOUD, so that they can provide LSVT eLOUD. So that, again, that search will be even better in the coming weeks. So we encourage you to look at our website and find that. You could also look at our website and find a local clinician and see if they do LSVT eLOUD, even if they weren't specifically checked, just in case the search didn't bring them up for some reason, but ask if they've taken the course in LSVT eLOUD, or if they have any recommendations for providers that can do it, because it's certainly becoming more and more popular. So in summary, the intensity of LSVT LOUD treatment we know is essential to maintain the treatment fidelity, but there are some real-world challenges that can get in the way of this intensive mode of delivery. So such as distance to a clinician, again, you might live far away in a rural area. Time, so you might be working full-time still and all you have is a 1-hour lunch break, but you don't have the time for travel before and after that lunch break. So could they just pop into your office via telepractice during your lunch hour and do that session there. Mobility issues, expensive travel, again, effort and fatigue associated with travel, as Angela mentioned before. So because of these barriers, we've turned to technology to possibly utilize or be utilized to make intensive treatment feasible for different scenarios. The LSVT Companion may be used to supplement a portion of treatment sessions, as Angela mentioned before, and or can be used for homework practice and maintenance in a client's home or office. So wherever you want to do your practicing, your clinician could set it up again so that you could either be using it for treatment sessions or your homework sessions or continued homework sessions after treatment so that you're able to maintain a good schedule of homework practice and get that nice audio and visual feedback. LSVT eLOUD, or the telepractice delivery of LSVT LOUD, can make it possible to receive live treatment from a clinician in real time without the expense, time, or mobility required to travel. So another option with technology that can be utilized again to make treatment more feasible if you do experience any of those barriers. So just so you're aware of some further learning opportunities, we do host these public webinars once a month on various topics related to LSVT LOUD and LSVT Big and Parkinson's in general. So we send a monthly email to all individuals that we have right now on our contact list. If you don't receive those, certainly email us. You can email info@lsvtglobal.com to be put on that list. We also have upcoming webinars on our website. If you go to lsvtglobal.com and click on patient resources, you'll see both our live webinars and our on-demand webinars. So the on-demand webinars are webinars that we record and they're available anytime for you to view. They're just the recorded versions of all of these live webinars. And then we also have the live webinars, those upcoming webinars listed on that portion of our site there. There's new LOUD for Life and Big for Life courses and clinicians that are being trained in that method, which is the group follow-up classes or group maintenance classes after someone completes LSVT LOUD or LSVT Big. So if you have completed one of those treatment programs, on the new website, you'll also be able to find LSVT Big and LSVT or LOUD for Life and Big for Life providers if you're interested in joining some of those more regularly scheduled maintenance group classes with those clinicians. So you can find that on the new website, or in the interim here, if you just contact your local clinician and ask if they do those classes or if they know someone in the area who does them. That's another way to find out right now. We have a homework helper DVD that can also be used for LSVT LOUD homework practice. It's Dr. Cynthia Fox walking through the exercises with a client. So another way that you can follow along at home when you're doing your practice. There's either a DVD available for purchase or a streaming option available for rent or for purchase if you're interested in that. So some of our upcoming webinars in May, we have a webinar on application of LSVT LOUD to pediatric motor speech disorders. And then in June, we have an introduction to LSVT LOUD and LSVT Big, speech, physical, and occupational therapies for Parkinson's. So it gives you more information, more in-depth information on both of those treatment approaches. So if you're interested in attending either of those, again, go to our website and register or pass this information along to any friends, family members, colleagues that you think may be interested in this information. So we'll spend a few minutes here and we can stay on extra if we need to address any questions. But if you have any questions related to technology and LSVT LOUD or really anything with LSVT LOUD, please feel free to ask them. So you can either type in your question box on the webinar control panel and we'll read your question out loud and answer it that way. Or you can raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon in your webinar control panel. We'll see you have your hand raised. I'll unmute your microphone and call out your first and last name. If you think of questions after the webinar, you can also always email us. So it's info@lsvtglobal.com, and we can get back to you that way. All right, so I've seen a few questions come in, so let me go ahead and ask these ones out loud. Okay, so Angela, I'm going to have you go ahead and take this one with regards to the LSVT Companion. Okay, so this individual has said, so this is regarding the slide video on the LSVT Companion. It occurs to me that getting loud could be enhanced or have the same results achieved if vocal practice was followed. For example, I used to sing in a Cornish male voice choir, which met weekly. 2 hours of vocal practice each week with concerts every fortnight helps speech, vocality, pronunciation, rhythm, and overall confidence. So if you can speak to that. And this is Colin from Scotland. So thank you for being here, Colin.
Great, wonderful question. Yes, we do frequently get questions about the impact of singing, and what if I were to do singing instead of LSVT Loud? And singing can be a wonderful way to exercise your voice, and it sounds like you've personally, seen some benefits from that. As you know, as a singer, it really can work on respiration, work on getting that good vocal tone, and have some nice benefits. What research has shown us thus far in the studies that have been done is that while singing might be good exercise, it's then that translation back into everyday conversational speech that doesn't necessarily happen. And so that's why what we recommend is for actually exercising voice for translation into conversational speech to do the LSVT Loud. But then if you are a singer, certainly, and you enjoy those activities, that's a great, fantastic way to continue to exercise in addition. So we do both. I wouldn't have one be exclusive of, I wouldn't have the singing be exclusive of the LSVT Loud, but certainly the singing could help with good voice maintenance, and it's a fun activity as well.
All right, great. Thank you, Angela. That was a very helpful response. So this question has to do with Medicare, when I was talking about that before. So how can Medicare prevent beneficiaries from seeking and obtaining funding privately or independently for LSVT treatment? So the rationale with Medicare, and this is again specific to telepractice, so they do reimburse for in-person sessions. And so their rationale is that because they cover in-person sessions, then a client needs to receive those sessions in person. So that's why they don't reimburse for telepractice sessions. And even clinicians get confused on this, and they think, well, can someone privately pay because Medicare doesn't cover telepractice sessions? And to that, Medicare would say no, because Medicare does cover for in-person delivery, so face-to-face in-person. Then the client needs to do it face-to-face. So again, ASHA is working very hard to kind of move Medicare forward on this, because they do reimburse for telepractice in other professions. And so speech and audiology right now, unfortunately, they don't reimburse for telepractice, but the hope is that in the near future that they will start doing that. But that kind of gives you a little rationale of why they say that it can't be reimbursed at this time. But again, hopefully that will be changed in the near future. And this kind of goes along with it, so I'll go ahead and take this one. So if you're a Medicare beneficiary with supplemental health insurance coverage, can the supplemental insurance cover eLOUD? So I don't want to answer that definitively, but I know if you do have another insurance, then you can, and they do cover telepractice, then I do believe you can bill them to be covered. So the tricky thing is making sure that the supplemental insurance is the one that's billed and not Medicare, because Medicare is going to come back and not reimburse it and tell the clinician that they shouldn't that they can't deliver the service that way. I want to say that yes, this is a possibility, but again, it's important for you and the clinician to be on the same page and making sure that the clinician is following the proper steps on their end to make sure the right party is billed, and so that it's not being billed to your Medicare, but it's being billed to a different insurance company that you're using. So before you got into treatment with your clinician, again, I would just make sure that you're both on the same page with that and making sure the clinician's aware so that the clinician does bill correctly and that it goes to your other insurance. Okay, Angela, I'm going to have you take this one. This is in regards to the video with Bob. So in the video demonstration with Bob, he seems flat in his delivery of the ah. Does pitch have an influence on the loudness scale slide?
So the ah, the first ah that's practiced, the daily exercise 1, is to be practiced at a modal or speaking pitch. So yes, that ah is supposed to just stay at one pitch. The reason for that is, once again, everything we do in LSVT Loud has the ultimate goal of translating into your conversational speech. So it's great if someone can come in my office and say, but out in the real world, they don't walk up to a deli counter and say, they have to walk up to the deli counter and say, I want a pound of roast beef in a nice loud voice. So with the therapist, we really train people working on the to make sure they practice it where they talk. And so it's purposefully just a sustained on a speaking pitch. Now, the daily exercise 2, that's where we really work on, and that was not shown in the video, that's where we really work on stretching the voice to get more of that intonation and inflection. And we've seen in our research changes in pitch variability following LSVT loud treatment. So people will do ahs high and ahs low. So ah, or in a variety of ways to really work on that aspect. So yes, that part wasn't shown in the video.
All right, thank you, Angela. And then just a follow-up from the gentleman who asked that question. So thanks for the reply, good points made. And he's saying the difficulty here in Scotland and the UK is the limited number of LSVT practitioners. So he's saying the nearest one to him is 300 miles away in England. So we need greater exposure in Europe. So thank you. So we do, oh, go ahead, Angela.
No, I just, that speaks exactly to why we're trying to do this webinar and get the word out. You're exactly right. It's 300 miles makes it difficult. Something that we could do is to try to connect with you and see if there are, if you want to provide your contact information to Beth, and see if there are some LSVT Loud certified therapists who can also practice in Scotland. So maybe there's, you know, the one that's 300 miles away. We could look at some telepractice options. The other thing is that we highly recommend talking to speech therapists near you and saying, I would really like you to get trained and certified in this approach. We have certainly, Beth and I both, when we have taught courses, had therapists come up to us and say, I'm here because a person with Parkinson's asked me to be here to get trained because they wanted the treatment. So that can really be a big motivator for therapists in your area as well.
Great. Yes. Thank you, Angela. So the next one, we have not been able to find in-home speech therapist in Orange County, California that is LSVT Loud certified. Can your organization assist us in finding an in-home speech therapist? So yes, if you can email, so again, info@lsvtglobal.com. And I was going to just pull up the phone number real quick too. And you can either email or call our office and someone will be happy to help you try to find a clinician in your area. We also encourage clinicians to keep their information up to date because sometimes there might be someone in your area, but their information is outdated in the search. So we really encourage them to go in anytime they move or take a new job and make sure that's up to date. So let me just give you that phone number. So this is to the main office, and someone could certainly assist you. So it's toll free. It's 1-888-438-5788. And again, that's info@lsvtglobal.com would be the email address. Okay, so we have one last question here. And Angela, if you want to take this one. So does LSVT help with swallowing and saliva control?
Excellent question. We have some preliminary data, and we say it's preliminary because there were only 8 people in the study, so we can't generalize this data yet. But we do have some preliminary data in those 8 people that did show some improvements in what we call the oral phase of the swallow. So meaning the time it took and the control of when the food or liquid is in the mouth. In Parkinson's disease, sometimes there can be a delay in what we call oral transit time. So some people notice that it's difficult to get the food moved to the back of their mouth to initiate swallow. And so those are things involved in the oral phase. Because that study was so small, we can't say at this point in time that, yes, LSVT LOUD is a treatment for swallowing. What we are doing is we finished a 3rd very large randomized controlled trial in 2012, and we had 64 individuals with Parkinson's disease in that study, some who had treatment, some who had LSVT LOUD, some who had an alternative treatment. All had swallow studies before and after the treatment phase. And we have swallow experts that we've shipped that data off to. So it's x-rays of swallowing before and after to analyze that. So hopefully we'll have more information about it soon. So what we say to people is, it's not, LSVT LOUD is not a replacement for swallowing therapy. If you're having swallowing problems, you probably need direct swallowing therapy with a speech therapist, and I would talk to your doctor and try to get that referral as soon as possible. But if you're also doing LSVT LOUD, might you see some benefits in swallowing? Maybe, perhaps, based on this preliminary study that we did.
Okay, well, thanks so much, Angela. Another comment came in, and I won't say everything with it, but I do want to mention, so something that came in here is this person says that they have more issues with mobility and not speech issues just yet. And so we have LSVT Big, which this client is referring to here. And so with LSVT Big, so that's the body movement approach. So we train physical and occupational therapists in that approach. And just like with LSVT LOUD, the focus is on loudness. With LSVT Big, you may have guessed that the focus is on big movements, so that it can help with everyday movements and improving movement. Also fine motor skills, which we did a webinar on earlier this month. But anyways, what the point I wanted to address was saying that there's no speech issues yet. So we still do encourage, and really our dream is that upon diagnosis, every client was referred for speech and physical or occupational therapy. So even though changes in speech may not be noticeable at this point, we say that if you can get in, the earlier the better. So that if you get LSVT LOUD early on, you may be able to maintain where you are instead of seeing those more overt symptoms come on later, and then it's harder to bring you back to the current level of functioning that you're at. Sometimes you'll also notice, or others may notice, that you have speech difficulties that you're not aware of, or maybe a clinician will kind of be able to tease out those speech difficulties. For example, if you're trying to speak while doing a cognitive task, or while you're tying your shoes or getting money out of your wallet or walking and speaking. And so a clinician can work with you on that to make sure you're able to maintain that good voice quality, good loudness, and no matter what you're doing. So we do, again, our dream is that everyone receives LSVT LOUD and LSVT Big upon diagnosis to have the greatest impact. So we say the earlier the better. But certainly great to hear that you're also looking into LSVT Big. for the movement challenges that you're expecting or you're experiencing. So thank you so much. We appreciate this gentleman has asked some really nice questions here tonight, as well as others. So we really appreciate the feedback and the questions that we've had. We hope that this has been educational for you, and just letting you know that we're here for you, for your questions that come up. We'd love to see you on a future webinar. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Angela, for the great presentation and responses to questions. And again, we hope to see you again in the future. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.